Admiral Vextar stood on the command deck of his massive warship, watching the endless stars through the thick viewing glass. His 6 eyes moved slowly across the space in front of him, counting the ships that floated in perfect lines. 200. Vessels stretched out like deadly metal birds, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy entire cities. The ships belonged to 7 different alien races. They all served the same master now, the Zephyrian Empire. The Admiral's long, thin fingers traced patterns on the control panel, while his mind wandered to past victories. 300 years had passed since any enemy had lasted more than a few days against their forces. Planet after planet had fallen to their superior technology in overwhelming numbers. Some worlds surrendered immediately when they saw the Armada approaching. Others tried to fight but were crushed within hours. None had ever posed a real threat to the mighty Zephyrian fleet. Behind Vextar, dozens of crew members worked at their stations, their movements precise and efficient. The bridge hummed with quiet activity as officers monitored weapon systems, navigation computers, and communication arrays. Green lights blinked steadily on every control board, indicating that all systems were operating at peak performance. The ship itself was a marvel of engineering, stretching nearly 2 kilometers from front to back and bristling with enough weapons to level mountain ranges. A younger officer approached the Admiral, his footsteps echoing softly on the metal floor. Lieutenant Zixmal had served under Vextar for 15 years and had witnessed the conquest of 12 different worlds. His voice carried the confidence that came from never experiencing defeat. "Admiral, our long-range scanning equipment has finished examining the target system," Zixmal reported, holding a data tablet in his clawed hands. "The 3rd planet from their star shows clear signs of intelligent life. We are detecting radio, wave transmissions, primitive satellite networks, and basic space exploration technology. Their development level appears to match our standard pre-industrial classification." Vextar's mandibles clicked together in a sound that resembled laughter among his species. He had heard this same report countless times before. Another young, a civilization that thought themselves advanced, but were actually thousands of years behind Zephyrian science. Their satellites were probably crude metal boxes held together with simple chemical fuels. Their radio signals were likely weak and unfocused, barely reaching beyond their own planetary atmosphere. "Have our scouts provided any additional information about their military capabilities?" the Admiral asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Yes, sir. Orbital observation shows no evidence of advanced defensive systems. Their largest vessels appear to be chemical-powered rockets that can barely escape their planet's gravity well. Ground-based telescopes suggest they have only recently begun to explore their immediate solar neighborhood. Intelligence estimates their technology level to be approximately 3,000 years behind our current standard." The Admiral walked slowly to the main tactical display, where a 3-dimensional map showed their current position relative to the target system. Bright dots represented each ship in his fleet, while the human solar system appeared as a small cluster of planets orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. The 3rd planet glowed with a soft blue light, indicating the presence of liquid water and atmospheric conditions suitable for life. "What about those unusual energy signatures our deep space monitoring stations detected 6 months ago?" Vextar inquired, remembering the initial reports that had prompted this mission. Lieutenant Zixmal consulted his tablet again. "Our scientists believe those readings were probably natural phenomena, solar flares, asteroid impacts, or possibly primitive nuclear testing. Nothing that would indicate advanced technology beyond their apparent developmental stage." Vextar nodded slowly, his confidence growing with each piece of information. The pattern was always the same. Young civilizations often created brief energy spikes as they discovered basic nuclear physics or began crude space exploration programs. These humans were clearly following the standard progression that his forces had encountered hundreds of times before. "What do they call themselves?" the Admiral asked, more out of curiosity than tactical necessity. "According to their radio transmissions, they refer to themselves as humans. They appear to be a single-species planet with multiple political divisions. Our translation computers have identified over 200 different languages, suggesting significant cultural fragmentation." This should make conquest easier, as they likely lack unified military command structures. The Admiral's tactical mind began working through the standard conquest protocol. Divided civilizations were always easier to defeat because their governments wasted precious time arguing with each other instead of mounting coordinated resistance. Even if these humans had some basic military technology, their political divisions would prevent them from using it effectively. Estimated population? Vexstar asked. Approximately 8 billion individuals concentrated primarily on the land masses of their single inhabited world. Population density maps suggest several major urban centers that could serve as control points. Once the initial subjugation is complete, 8 billion was a large number, but not unprecedented. The Admiral had conquered worlds with similar populations before, and the process had been surprisingly straightforward. Once their government centers were destroyed and their communication networks disrupted, large populations actually became an advantage. The workers meant faster resource extraction and greater economic value for the Empire. Vexstar returned to the viewing window, gazing out at his magnificent fleet. Each ship represented decades of advanced engineering and centuries of military experience. Their weapons could slice through planetary atmospheres like knives through fabric. Their shields could deflect the combined firepower of entire primitive and fleets. Their engines could cross the vast distances between stars in days, rather than the years it would take these humans with their chemical rockets. "Signal all ship commanders," the Admiral ordered. "We will maintain standard battle formation. During our approach, weapons charged, but not targeted. We want to demonstrate overwhelming superiority without appearing needlessly aggressive. Once we achieve orbital position around their world, I will personally deliver our standard surrender terms." "Understood." "Sir, should we prepare the usual occupation protocols?" "Yes, but keep them simple. These humans seem to have a reasonably large population and established infrastructure. If they surrender quickly, we can have their world fully integrated into the Empire within 2 standard cycles. Their radio technology suggests they have at least basic industrial capability, which could be useful once properly directed." "Lieutenant." Zixmal saluted and moved away to relay the orders. Within minutes, the entire fleet began shifting into attack formation. The largest battleships took positions at the front, their massive hulls designed to intimidate as much as destroy. Smaller cruisers and destroyers formed protective screens around the flanks, while support vessels remained safely in the rear. It was a formation that had terrified countless worlds and never failed to achieve the desired psychological effect. As the Great Armada began its final approach toward the human solar system, Admiral Vexstar felt the familiar satisfaction that came before another easy victory. Soon, this blue world would join the hundreds of others that flew the Zephyrian flag. Their resources would fuel the Empire's continued expansion. Their population would serve the greater glory of Zephyrian civilization. The Admiral had no way of knowing that every movement of his fleet was being carefully tracked by sensors, far more sophisticated than anything his scientists could imagine. Hidden observation posts throughout the outer solar system were recording detailed information about Zephyrian ship designs, weapon capabilities, and tactical formations. Deep beneath the surface of several asteroids, automated systems were already calculating firing solutions and preparing responses that would soon shock the invading fleet beyond their worst nightmares. The humans had indeed been watching the Zephyrian Empire's expansion for many years, but not as primitive observers trembling before superior technology. They had been studying, learning, and preparing for this exact moment. The energy signatures that had first attracted Zephyrian attention were not accidents or natural phenomena, but carefully planned tests of weapon systems that operated on principles the aliens had never encountered. As Admiral Vexstar's fleet moved closer to what he believed would be another easy conquest, the trap was already closing around them. The massive Zephyrian fleet moved through space like a dark cloud of metal and death, passing the outer planets of the human solar system with deadly purpose. Admiral Vexstar stood confidently on his bridge, watching the tactical displays that showed his 200 ships maintaining perfect formation. The gas giant Jupiter loomed ahead, swirling storms and numerous moons, creating a beautiful but meaningless backdrop to what should be humanity's final hours. Lieutenant Zixmal monitored the sensor readings, his multiple eyes scanning the data streams that flowed across his control panel. Everything appeared normal as they approached the inner system. The human homeworld still showed no signs of advanced military preparation, and their primitive satellites continued broadcasting the same weak radio signals that had first attracted Zephyrian attention months ago. "Admiral, we are now crossing the orbital path of the fifth planet," Zixmal reported. "All systems remain green, and the fleet maintains optimal attack formation. Estimated arrival at the target world in 6 standard hours." Vexstar nodded with satisfaction, his mandibles clicking softly as he anticipated another easy victory. His tactical officers had already calculated the precise positioning needed to demonstrate overwhelming force without actually destroying the planet's infrastructure. The key was to show these humans that resistance would be futile while keeping their industrial capacity intact for future exploitation. But as the fleet moved past Jupiter's massive bulk, something impossible happened. The great gas giant's shadows seemed to shift and move, as if the darkness itself was taking physical form. What emerged from that shadow defied every assumption the Zephyrians had made about human technology and military capability. A single vessel materialized from the concealment of Jupiter's bulk, its presence so unexpected that several Zephyrian sensors actually malfunctioned trying to process what they were detecting. The ship that now faced their entire armada was unlike anything in their databases or their worst nightmares. It stretched through space like a dark mountain, its hull painted in deep black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The human battleship measured nearly 4 kilometers from bow to stern, making it almost twice the length of Admiral Vexstar's flagship. Its design was both elegant and terrifying, with smooth curves that spoke of advanced engineering principles, merged with angular weapon mounts that promised devastating firepower. The hull showed clear signs of previous battles, long scars that had been carefully repaired, impact craters that told stories of conflicts fought in distant systems, and weapon burns that suggested encounters with technology far beyond anything the Zephyrians had ever faced on the bridge of the human vessel. Captain Lee Haon stood calmly before the main view screen, his dark eyes studying the approaching alien fleet with the practiced gaze of a veteran warrior. He was a man of average height, with short black hair and a face that showed the weathering of years spent in deep space. His uniform was simple but well maintained, bearing the insignia of the human defense fleet and rank markers that indicated decades of service. Beside him, Commander Park Soo-jin worked efficiently at her station, her fingers moving quickly across control panels as she monitored the incoming alien transmissions. She was younger than the captain, but carried herself with the confidence of someone who had served through multiple deep space campaigns. Her role as communications officer required her to understand not just human languages, but dozens of alien dialects that the defense fleet had encountered over the years. "Captain, I am receiving initial communication attempts from the lead alien," Vessel Park reported, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the situation. "They are broadcasting on multiple frequencies, using what appears to be recently learned human languages. Translation quality is poor, but their intent seems clear." Lieutenant Kim Minho stood at the tactical station, his young face serious as he analyzed the enemy formation through the ship's advanced sensor arrays. Fresh from the Defense Fleet Academy, this was his first real combat situation, but his training had prepared him for exactly this type of encounter. The tactical displays before him showed detailed information about each alien vessel, from their energy signatures to their probable weapon capabilities. "Captain, I count exactly 200 enemy vessels in standard attack formation," Kim reported. "Their largest ships measure approximately 2 kilometers in length, which would classify them as heavy cruisers by our standards. Energy readings suggest conventional plasma-based weapons and basic deflector shield technology. No evidence of advanced defensive systems or exotic weapon types." Captain Lee nodded slowly, his expression remaining calm despite the overwhelming numerical disadvantage his single ship faced. Years of preparation had led to this moment, and he felt no fear as he contemplated the battle ahead. The alien fleet before him represented exactly the type of threat that humanity had been preparing to face for decades. "It's Commander Park. Open all communication channels," Lee ordered, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to command. "Broadcast on all frequencies, including the ones they have been using to monitor our civilian communications." The communication system activated with a soft chime, and Captain Lee's voice was transmitted across space to every ship in the alien fleet. His words were clear and direct, spoken in the tone of someone who expected to be obeyed rather than challenged. "This is Captain Lee Hayan of the Human Defense Fleet vessel Indomitable. You are trespassing in human space. Turn back now." The response came quickly, crackling through the communication array with the distorted sound of voices, speaking unfamiliar languages through primitive translation equipment. Admiral Vextar's words were barely recognizable as they struggled through the alien translation system, but his meaning was unmistakable. The Zephyrian commander was offering humanity the same terms he had presented to hundreds of other worlds: immediate surrender in exchange for merciful treatment. Primitive humans' Vextar's translated voice echoed across the bridge. "You face the combined might of the Zephyrian Empire. Your single vessel cannot hope to stand against our armada. Surrender now, and your world will be spared unnecessary destruction. Resist, and your civilization will be erased from the galaxy." Commander Park looked toward her captain, waiting for instructions on how to respond to the alien ultimatum. Around the bridge, other officers maintained their positions, but watched their commander carefully. Ready to follow whatever orders he might give, Captain Lee studied the tactical display for a long moment, noting the precise positioning of the alien ships and the aggressive nature of their formation. These were not explorers or diplomats. They were conquerors who had clearly never encountered serious resistance before. Their confidence was evident in the way they had arranged their fleet, with no consideration for defensive positioning or tactical flexibility. "Commander Park, transmit my response," Lee said quietly, his voice carrying across the bridge with absolute certainty. The communication system activated once again. Captain Lee's reply was broadcast directly to Admiral Vextar's flagship. His words were simple and direct, spoken with the calm confidence of someone who held all the advantages despite appearances to the contrary. "Negative. You have 10 minutes to withdraw." The transmission ended, leaving both fleets facing each other across the vast emptiness of space. On the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral Vextar stared at his communication display in complete disbelief, unable to comprehend how a single human vessel could dare challenge his entire armada. The countdown had begun, and in 10 minutes, the galaxy would witness a demonstration of human military capability that would forever change the balance of power among the stars. Admiral Vextar stared at the communication display where the human captain's final words still echoed in his mind. 10 minutes to withdraw. The sheer audacity of this single human vessel challenging his entire armada was beyond comprehension. In 3 centuries of conquest, no enemy had ever dared to speak to the Zephyrian Empire with such disrespect. The Admiral's 6 eyes narrowed as he turned to face his tactical officers. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of growing anger among his species. Round the bridge, crew members watched their commander carefully, sensing the shift in his mood from confident amusement to dangerous irritation. "Lieutenant Zixmel," Vextar called out, his voice carrying the edge of barely controlled fury. "These humans clearly do not understand the magnitude of their mistake. They believe their single ship can somehow match the combined firepower of 200 Zephyrian vessels. We will educate them about the true nature of galactic warfare." Zixmal approached his commander's position, data tablet in hand. His own expression showed confusion about the human response, but he maintained his professional demeanor despite the unusual circumstances. "What are your orders, Admiral?" "Select 50 of our finest ships, cruisers and destroyers, with the most experienced crews. I want a demonstration of Zephyrian military superiority, but do not destroy their vessel completely. Disable their engines and weapon systems, but leave their hull intact. I want the survivors to witness our power before they surrender their world." The tactical officer nodded and began transmitting orders to the selected vessels. Across the Zephyrian fleet, 50 ships, began moving into optimal firing positions. Their captains were veterans of countless battles, and they approached this task with the precision that had made the Empire's military forces legendary throughout the galaxy. Captain Li Hun stood quietly on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the alien fleet's movements through the main view screen. His expression remained calm as he observed the enemy ships positioning themselves for what was clearly intended to be an overwhelming display of firepower. Beside him, his crew maintained their stations with professional efficiency, their faces showing no sign of fear despite the impossible odds they faced. "Captain, 50 enemy vessels are moving into attack formation," Lieutenant Kim reported from his tactical station. "Energy readings indicate they are charging their primary weapons systems. Estimated time to weapons range is 3 minutes." Commander Park monitored the alien communications, listening to the rapid exchanges between the attacking ships as they coordinated their assault. "Sir, they appear to be planning a simultaneous strike designed to disable rather than destroy. They still believe they can capture our vessel intact." "Let them maintain that belief," Lee replied quietly. "All stations, prepare for incoming fire. Shield generators to maximum power, but do not activate defensive weapons until I give the order." The 50 selected Zephyrian ships moved with deadly grace, their hulls gleaming in the light of the distant sun as they approached their target. Each vessel carried weapons that had reduced entire planetary defense systems to scrap metal. Their plasma cannons could melt through the strongest known armor, while their particle beam arrays could disrupt the molecular structure of any material they encountered. Admiral Vextar watched the tactical display with growing satisfaction. As his ships moved into position, human vessel remained stationary, making no attempt to evade or defend itself. Either these humans were paralyzed with fear, or they were even more primitive than initial reports had suggested. "All selected vessels report ready for coordinated strike," Zixmal announced. "Weapons charged and targeted." "Awaiting your command, Admiral." "Fire," Vextar ordered simply. Space erupted in a brilliant display of destructive energy as 50 Zephyrian warships unleashed their fury simultaneously. Plasma streams that burned hotter than stellar cores lanced across the void, while particle beams that could shatter asteroids converged on the lone human battleship. The combined firepower was enough to obliterate a small moon, and it struck the Indomitable with the force of a collapsing star. The energy discharge created a brief artificial sun in the darkness of space, its light visible from the inner planets of the solar system. Any conventional vessel caught in such a barrage would have been vaporized instantly, leaving nothing but scattered atoms drifting in the cosmic wind. But as the light faded and the energy dissipated, the human ship remained exactly where it had been. Its dark hull showed no signs of damage, no scorch marks from the plasma impacts, no structural deformation from the particle bombardment. It hung in space like an indestructible monument, completely unaffected by the most powerful weapons the Zephyrian Empire could deploy. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Commander Park studied her tactical displays with the detached interest of a scientist observing a routine experiment. The ship's defensive systems had absorbed the alien attack so effortlessly that most of the crew had barely noticed the impact. "Shield status report," Captain Lee requested calmly. "Shields holding at 98%, Captain," Park replied. "The enemy weapons caused minimal energy drain. Our defensive systems are operating well within normal parameters." Lieutenant Kim looked up from his station, his young face showing amazement at the effectiveness of their technology. "Sir, their plasma cannons are approximately 50 years behind our current defensive capabilities. The particle beams are even more primitive. They barely registered on our sensors." Captain Lee nodded thoughtfully. The alien weapons were indeed outdated by human standards, but they had clearly been effective against other species. This suggested that humanity's technological development had followed a different path than most galactic civilizations, focusing on defensive systems and energy management rather than raw destructive power. "Should we return fire, Captain?" Park asked, her finger hovering over the weapon control systems. Lee considered the question for a moment, weighing the tactical situation against the broader implications of this first contact scenario. The alien fleet had just demonstrated their hostile intentions with an unprovoked attack. Any response would be justified under standard military protocols. A single-shot commander. Main cannon only. The Indomitable's primary weapon system had been developed in absolute secrecy over the course of 30 years. It represented the pinnacle of human engineering, incorporating scientific principles that most species had never encountered. The weapon drew its power from controlled gravitational fields, manipulating the fundamental forces of reality itself. When Captain Lee gave the order to fire, the weapon activated with a sound that seemed to come from the fabric of space itself. The graviton pulse that emerged from the ship's main cannon was invisible to normal sensors, but its effects were immediately apparent. The beam tore through the quantum structure of reality, creating a localized distortion that warped space and time around its path. 3 Zephyrian cruisers happened to be positioned directly in the weapon's trajectory. As the graviton pulse reached them, they simply ceased to exist in any meaningful sense. Their matter was scattered across multiple dimensions, their energy patterns disrupted at the subatomic level. There was no explosion, no debris field, no trace that they had ever existed. The gravitational aftershock from the assault weapon's discharge created a secondary effect that caught 2 additional ships in its influence. The sudden distortion in local spacetime generated tidal forces that crushed the vessels like tin cans, their hulls collapsing under stresses that exceeded the structural limits of any known material in the span of 3 seconds. 5 Zephyrian warships had been completely destroyed by a single shot from the human vessel. The remaining 45 ships that had participated in the attack found themselves facing an enemy whose capabilities exceeded their worst nightmares. Silence fell across both fleets as the magnitude of what had just occurred began to sink in. On the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral Vexstar stared at his tactical display in complete disbelief. 5 ships had simply vanished from his screens, their transponder signals cut off as if they had never existed. Captain Lieutenant Kim reported, quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, "The alien formation is breaking apart. They're retreating from their own firing positions." Captain Lee Hoon stood in the center of his bridge, surrounded by the quiet hum of advanced technology that had just demonstrated its devastating effectiveness. The destruction of 5 Zephyrian ships in a single moment had created a silence that stretched across both fleets, broken only by the soft beeping of monitoring equipment and the distant whisper of life. Support systems. The human captain looked out at the alien armada through the main view screen, noting how their once perfect formation had begun to dissolve into chaos. Ships that had approached with confident aggression were now pulling back from their attack positions, their crews undoubtedly struggling to understand what they had just witnessed. "Commander Park, open a general communication channel," Lee ordered, his voice carrying the same calm authority it had maintained throughout the encounter. "I want every ship in their fleet to receive this transmission clearly." Park's fingers moved across her control panel with practiced efficiency, establishing communication links with all 200 vessels in the Zephyrian Armada. The ship's advanced communication systems easily penetrated the alien frequencies, ensuring that Captain Lee's words would be heard by every crew member in the opposing fleet. "Channel open, Captain," Park reported. "Yes. All enemy vessels are receiving our signal." Lee stepped forward slightly, positioning himself directly in front of the main communication array. His expression remained calm but authoritative as he began to speak, knowing that his words would be heard by beings who had never before encountered serious resistance to their expansion. "Admiral Vexstar, I believe proper introductions are in order. I'm Captain Lee Haon of the Human Defense Fleet, and you have just witnessed humanity's standard response to unprovoked aggression against our territory." On the bridge of the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral Vexstar listened to the human captain's words with growing unease. The casual way this single enemy commander spoke about destroying 5 warships as a standard response suggested military capabilities far beyond anything the Empire had encountered before. Captain Lee continued his transmission, gesturing toward Commander Park, who began activating additional display systems. "I think it would be helpful for you to understand exactly what you have encountered here today. Your intelligence gathering was impressive, but it was also incomplete." The main view screen shifted to show a complex tactical display that made Admiral Vextar's blood run cold. Instead of showing just the single human vessel they had been facing, the screen now revealed 11 identical ships positioned throughout the solar system. Each one was as massive and heavily armed as the Indomitable, creating a defensive network that surrounded the entire human territory. "These are the patrol vessels of the human defense fleet," Lee explained, his voice carrying across space to the terrified alien crews. "Each one is equipped with the same weapons and defensive systems you have already experienced. They have been monitoring your approach since you entered our outer sensor range 3 days ago." Lieutenant Kim worked at his tactical station, coordinating with the other human vessels to provide additional information for the display. The data stream showed not just the positions of the defending ships, but also detailed intelligence about the Zephyrian fleet itself: ship classifications, weapon capabilities, crew complements, and tactical formations. "We have been observing your empire's expansion for 47 years, Captain Lee continued. "Your military tactics, your technological capabilities, your standard conquest procedures. We know how you operate, Admiral, because we have been preparing for this encounter since we first detected your forces moving through this sector of the galaxy." The transmission display shifted again, showing star charts that revealed the true scope of human expansion. Worlds that the Zephyrians had marked as uninhabitable or uninhabited showed clear signs of thriving human colonies. Defensive installations appeared on asteroids and moons throughout multiple star systems, their energy signatures registering as more powerful than anything in the Zephyrian military database. Admiral Vextar stared at the display in growing horror, realizing that everything his scouts had reported about human capabilities had been carefully orchestrated deception. The primitive radio signals, the basic satellites, the apparent lack of advanced technology, all of it had been an elaborate facade, designed to lure the Zephyrian fleet into a carefully prepared trap. "How is this possible?" Vextar whispered to his tactical officer. "Our deep space monitoring stations would have detected this level of technological development. Our scouts reported primitive chemical rockets and basic industrial capacity." Lieutenant Zixmal studied his own sensor readings, multiple eyes wide with shock as he processed the information streaming from the human transmission. "Admiral, they appear to have been using some form of advanced camouflage technology. Their actual capabilities were hidden beneath false sensor readings designed to match our expectations." Commander Park stepped forward on the human bridge, her expression serious as she addressed her captain. "Sir, should we show them the Titan base footage? It might help them understand the full scope of what they're facing." Captain Lee nodded, knowing that the alien fleet needed to see the complete picture before they could make an informed decision about their next course of action. "Transmit the surveillance recordings from the outer system defensive installations." The view screen shifted once more, revealing footage that had been captured by automated monitoring systems positioned throughout the asteroid belt. The images showed a massive military installation built into what appeared to be a cluster of ordinary space rocks, but which was actually a carefully constructed fortress designed to defend the inner solar system. The Titan base stretched across dozens of asteroids, connected by tunnels and defensive corridors that had been carved from solid rock over the course of decades. Weapons platforms that dwarfed the largest Zephyrian battleships moved with smooth precision, their targeting systems casually tracking objects moving at speeds that approach the velocity of light. "This is one of 7 major defensive installations in our home system," Lee explained. "Each base is equipped with graviton cannons, quantum disruptors, and defensive shields powered by controlled stellar fusion. The weapons you see here are capable of destroying entire fleets from distances exceeding 1 light hour." The camera view shifted to show the base's manufacturing facilities, where automated systems were constructing additional defensive platforms and support vessels. The production capacity visible in the footage exceeded anything the Zephyrian Empire had ever achieved, suggesting an industrial infrastructure that had been developed over many generations. "We chose to remain hidden until you came to us, Captain," Lee continued, his voice carrying across space to every ship in the alien fleet. "Now you understand why. Humanity did not develop in isolation, Admiral. We developed in preparation for exactly this type of encounter," transmission showed. Additional footage of human colonies on worlds throughout the local stellar neighborhood. Advanced cities thrived in environments that would have been deadly to most species, protected by technology that manipulated gravity, atmosphere, and even local space-time to create habitable conditions. "Your empire has been expanding for 3 centuries," Lee said, "conquering worlds whose inhabitants were unprepared for your arrival. We have been preparing for your arrival for nearly half that time, studying your methods and developing countermeasures for every weapon and tactic in your arsenal." Admiral Vexstar felt the weight of complete tactical failure settling on his shoulders as he absorbed the magnitude of what he was seeing. His mighty armada, which had seemed invincible just moments before, was now revealed to be hopelessly outmatched by an enemy that had been watching and preparing for their arrival for decades. The human captain's final words carried the quiet confidence of someone who held all the advantages in a situation that appeared hopeless for his opponents. "The question now, Admiral, is what you intend to do with this knowledge. We can discuss this situation like civilized beings, or we can continue the demonstration of human defensive capabilities. The choice is entirely yours." Admiral Vexstar stood frozen on his command bridge, his 6 eyes fixed on the tactical display that showed a nightmare beyond his worst fears. What had begun as a routine conquest had transformed into the most devastating military defeat in Zephyrian history. Space around his fleet, which moments before had seemed empty except for the single human vessel, now revealed itself to be filled with ships that defied every assumption about human technology. One by one, additional human vessels began to decloak around the Zephyrian armada. Each ship that appeared was identical to the Indomitable in size and design, their dark hulls materializing from what had seemed like empty space. The cloaking technology that had hidden them was so advanced that even the Empire's most sensitive sensors had detected nothing until the humans chose to reveal themselves. "Admiral," Lieutenant Zixmal whispered, his voice trembling as he watched the display, "we count 15. No, 20 human vessels now visible. They have us completely surrounded." The tactical situation was beyond hopeless. Each human ship was larger and more powerful than Vexstar's flagship, and their weapons had already demonstrated the ability to destroy multiple Zephyrian vessels with a single shot. The alien admiral realized that his entire fleet had been drawn into a carefully prepared trap, with the Indomitable serving as bait to lure them into the perfect position for destruction. The human ships moved with predatory grace, positioning themselves at strategic points around the Zephyrian formation. Their movements were coordinated with mathematical precision, creating interlocking fields of fire that would make escape impossible if they chose to attack. Every aspect of their deployment spoke of military planning that had been years in the making. Captain Li Hun watched the alien fleet's growing panic through his main view screen, noting how their once proud formation was beginning to dissolve. As individual ships tried to find defensive positions that did not exist, the terror in their movements was obvious, but he took no pleasure in their fear. This demonstration had been necessary to prevent a larger conflict that would have cost countless lives on both sides. Commander Park Lee said quietly, "Monitor their internal communications. I want to know what they're saying to each other." Park's fingers moved across her control panel, accessing the alien communication networks with technology that made their encryption systems useless. The conversations flowing between Zephyrian ships painted a picture of complete military collapse, with junior officers questioning orders and ship commanders requesting permission to withdraw. "Sir, their fleet discipline is breaking down, Park. Reported multiple vessels are asking for immediate retreat orders. Some captains are suggesting they should surrender before we decide to destroy them all." The magnitude of their technological disadvantage was becoming clear to every member of the Zephyrian fleet. Their most advanced weapons had failed to even scratch the human shields, while a single shot from human guns had erased 5 of their ships from existence. The mathematical reality of the situation was simple and terrifying. They were facing an enemy that could destroy their entire armada without suffering a single casualty. Admiral Vexstar's mandibles clicked nervously as he struggled to process the complete failure of everything he had believed about galactic warfare. His empire had conquered hundreds of worlds through superior technology and overwhelming force. But now he faced beings whose capabilities exceeded his understanding of what was possible. "Open a communication channel to the human commander, Vextar ordered, his voice carrying none of the arrogance that had characterized his earlier transmissions. I need to speak with Captain Lee directly. The communication system activated. Vextar found himself looking at the calm face of the human captain who had orchestrated this devastating reversal of fortune. Lee's expression showed no anger or triumph, only the professional demeanor of a military officer conducting necessary business. Captain Lee Vextar began, his translated words carrying the weight of complete defeat. What are your terms for our withdrawal? Lee considered the question carefully before responding. The alien fleet posed no real threat to human forces, but they represented the advance guard of a much larger empire that would eventually learn about this encounter. The terms he offered now would determine whether humanity's first contact with galactic civilization would lead to peace or to a much larger war. My terms are simple, Admiral, Lee replied. Withdraw your fleet immediately from this system. Establish formal diplomatic contact through proper channels rather than military conquest. Recognize human sovereignty over this solar system and our established colonial territories. In return, we offer technological exchange programs and mutual defense agreements against common threats that may exist in this galaxy. The offer was far more generous than Vextar had expected. Instead of demanding surrender or tribute, the humans were proposing a relationship based on mutual respect and shared benefit. It was a type of first contact that the Zephyrian Empire had never experienced before. Having always approached new species as conquerors rather than potential allies, Lieutenant Kim monitored the alien communications networks. Listening to the frantic discussions that erupted across the Zephyrian fleet as news of the human terms spread from ship to ship. The conversations revealed a military force that was eager to accept any offer that would allow them to leave this system alive. Captain, their formation is collapsing completely, Kim reported. Multiple ships are requesting immediate permission to withdraw. Some are already powering up their hyperspace engines without waiting for orders. Admiral Vextar stared at his tactical display, watching as the discipline that had held his fleet together for 3 centuries began to crumble under the weight of absolute technological defeat. His officers were looking to him for leadership, but he had no experience with this type of situation. The Zephyrian military had never encountered an enemy that could dictate terms from a position of such overwhelming superiority. And if we refuse your terms? Vextar asked. Though his tone suggested he already understood the answer, the human response came not in words, but in a demonstration that made the previous display of firepower seem restrained by comparison. Every human vessel in the system activated their main weapons simultaneously, creating energy readings that registered as miniature stars on the Zephyrian sensors. The combined firepower aimed at his fleet was sufficient to sterilize entire star systems. I don't think you'll refuse, Admiral, Captain Lee said quietly, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone who held all the advantages in a situation that had become completely one-sided. The retreat began within minutes of the human weapon demonstration. Zephyrian ships that had approached the system with confident aggression now fled with desperate haste, their hyperspace engines creating brilliant flashes of light as they jumped to safety. Admiral Vextar was among the last to leave, his flagship disappearing into the cosmic distance with the knowledge that his empire's expansion had encountered its first movable obstacle, as the last alien vessel vanished from the sensor screens. Commander Park turned to her captain with a new contact report. Sir, we have a new vessel approaching on long-range sensors. It's flying neutral diplomatic flags and broadcasting peaceful intentions. Captain Lee smiled slightly as he realized that word of this encounter was already spreading through the galaxy's communication networks. The Zephyrian retreat would be noticed by other species, and humanity's demonstration of military capability would soon be known throughout the local stellar neighborhood. Signal them to approach, Commander. Have the diplomatic suite prepared for formal first contact procedures. Lee looked out at the stars with the satisfaction of a job well done. It seems that news travels quickly in this galaxy. We're about to have many more visitors, and I suspect they'll be much more interested in talking than fighting. The Indomitable turned toward the approaching diplomatic vessel, beginning humanity's first formal relationship. with a galaxy that would never again make the mistake of underestimating the species from the small blue world.